Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Clear your doubts about Islam. 50 answers to common questions. Compiled by Sahih International. Forward. No one can deny that Islam is very much in the spotlight today. In spite of extremely negative portrayals by Western media, or perhaps because of them, increasing numbers of people are seeking to find out more about it. I mean Islam. And more often than not, they are being pleasantly surprised by the fruits of their research. In fact, more people are embracing Islam today than they did prior to September 11, 2001. However, there does remain a great deal of misconception and misunderstanding on the subject, frequently fueled by political policies which deem it in their interest to support Islam's enemies. In addition, Muslims themselves, at first shocked and confused by the events of recent years, did not really know how to respond to the challenge. Now they have been rudely awakened to the urgency of refuting the many false claims and accusations being spread against their way of life and of defending the truth, and accordingly, the rights and honor of Muslims everywhere on earth. Islam is a religion and way of life of about 1/5 of the world's population. Muslims are of diverse nationalities, cultures, and races, but the religion teaches that all men are essentially equal and that no distinction should be made between them on the basis of such superficial differences as color, class status, or personal beliefs, as long as they remain peaceful and law-abiding citizens. The behavior of certain misguided groups or individuals outside the fold of mainstream Islam cannot be attributed to the religion any more than violence in North Ireland or mafia activities can be attributed to Christianity. People of secular cultures often fail to understand why practicing Muslims cannot always fit in completely with modern westernized lifestyles, why they insist upon a particular type of dress or upon prayer at particular times. They tend to perceive Muslim attitudes as unnecessarily demanding and uncompromising. Misunderstandings are frequently due to unmistakable differences between the Western concept of religion and that of Muslims. Islam can indeed seem strange to a society in which religion no longer plays a major role in everyday life. But to a dedicated Muslim, Islam is life, and there is no division between the secular and the sacred. Because religious practice occupies a narrow place in his outlook, the adherent to Western culture often does not comprehend the relationship between a Muslim and his religion, or what motivates him or her to take a particular direction in life. But in the view of Islam, religion is not merely a personal issue or something symbolic pertaining to a limited area of one's existence. On the contrary, it involves molding a balanced way of life suitable not only to Muslims, but to everyone who inclines toward peace, justice, and respect for rights. More simply, it can be said to mean the pursuit of happiness, security, and moral perfection. In the hearts of Muslims, the religion remains both a secure refuge and the most effective motivator for tackling all kinds of challenges. At the same time, it preserves the distinctive character of the Muslim believer and the pattern of his particular culture. An individual in the West might see religion within a limited context pertaining to worship alone, a private matter between a person and God. But in Islam, it is a dynamic system that organizes the progression of life according to basic general principles and flexible rulings that guarantee potential benefit from advancements in science and technology, as well as new material facilities. Since there is no conflict between Islam and scientific research, every new discovery in the world of matter, energy, time, and space only increases the believer in faith and humility towards him who devised, projected, and systematized such a plan, and then assigned to mankind his place and noble role within it. Within this understanding, it remains to be said that knowledgeable Muslims are not in need of secularism, since they have no problem with religion. It is hoped that by putting out accurate information in greater quantities, the world will eventually come to know Islam as it really is, and not as portrayed by its adversaries. It is toward this objective that Sahih International has produced a booklet providing answers to the questions most often raised by non-Muslims of the present day. We also invite our readers to find out more about Islam by contacting the nearest Islamic education center, bookstore, or library. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Clear your doubts about Islam. 50 answers to common questions. Compiled by Sahih International. Page 1. General. 1. What is Islam? Islam is an Arabic word which means peaceful, willing submission, submission to the code of conduct ordained by God. So Islam is a religion, but it is also a complete way of life based upon a voluntary relationship between an individual and his creator. It is the way of life ordained by God, which was taught by each of his prophets and messengers. What distinguishes Islam from other religions is that it refuses to accept any form of creation whatsoever as a deity worthy of worship. Instead, it emphasizes the exclusive worship of the one God who created the entire universe and to whom all creation will eventually return. Monotheism is the foundation of Islam and its most important concept, which cannot be compromised in any way. Not only is God acknowledged as the sole creator and sustainer of everything in existence, but Islam declares that He is the only true deity and He alone is worthy to be worshipped. Further, it recognizes that the attributes of God are nothing like those of His creation and cannot be compared to it. He is absolute, perfect, and unique. 2. What is a Muslim? A Muslim is someone who practices Islam, that is, who willingly submits to the revealed directives of God. Everything in the universe is inherently submissive to God, functioning according to the natural laws created by Him. Human beings are physically Muslim in that their bodies function according to the genetic program set by God for the period of time He has decreed. A Muslim in the religious sense or Islamic sense, however, is someone who consciously commits himself or herself to the worship of God alone, not according to his own inclinations or those of other men, but according to the method conveyed by God through His appointed prophets. The Quran gives many examples of people who lived before Muhammad and believed in and obeyed the prophet that God had sent them. They entered paradise because of their obedience to God, and that is the meaning of Islam. All the prophets of God from Adam to Muhammad and those who believed and followed each of them during the period of his prophethood were called Muslims. But since Prophet Muhammad was the last of God's messengers to mankind, a Muslim can now only be defined as one who accepts and complies with the final completed message conveyed by God through him. For rationally, the most recently revised legislation always supersedes and invalidates whatever came before it. 3. Isn't it true that Islam is an Arab religion? This mistaken assumption is possibly based on the fact that Prophet Muhammad was an Arab, that most of the first generation of Muslims were Arabs, and that the Quran is in the Arabic language. But in actual fact, only about 18% of Muslims in the world today are Arabs. The largest Muslim populations are found in Indonesia, the Indian subcontinent, and other parts of Asia. Islam is also widespread in many parts of Africa, and there are substantial minorities in Europe, North and South America, and Oceania. Islam is the fastest growing major religion in the world, and its adherents on all continents and its adherents on all continents include both Arabs and non-Arabs. Further, not all Arabs are Muslims, for there are significant communities of Christian Arabs as well as a number who belong to other religions or profess atheism. While Arab is a geographic and cultural term, Muslim refers to an adherent to the religion of Islam. While the revelation was still in its early stages, the Quran disclosed that Islam is indeed a global religion. Allah addressed His Prophet therein saying, "And we have not sent you but as a mercy to all the worlds. And we have not sent you except comprehensively to mankind, as a bringer of good tidings and a warner, but most of the people do not know." Islam is meant for all people regardless of race, nationality, cultural or religious background. From the commencement of his mission, the Prophet's companions came from a wide range of lands and races. Among them was an African, a Byzantine, a Persian, and a Jewish scholar. All were united in the brotherhood of faith. There are many references in the Quran to the universal nature of Islam. It frequently addresses humanity, saying, "O mankind," or "O people." The Prophet, his companions, and their followers made every effort to spread the message of truth to all nations and peoples. He naturally began the propagation of God's message among his own people, the Arabs, but that doesn't mean it was restricted to them. Rather, only that initially conveying it to those nearest him was the logical first step toward the realization of a long-term goal. Later in his mission, when conditions became more favorable, he sent letters of invitation to Islam to the rulers of the Byzantine and Persian empires, Abyssinia, Egypt, Damascus, Bahrain, Yamama, Oman, and others, who represented the influential world figures of the day. Whatever the response to it, the Prophet's message was fully acknowledged by the major powers of his time. 4. Isn't Islam just another faith based on legends? On the contrary, Islam is the only religion whose sources are authentically preserved, historically recognized, and have remained entirely free of a human alteration and interference over the centuries. Its divine scripture, the Quran, contains no myths or fables and is in accord with established facts of science. It provides an acceptable explanation of the origin. Development, and purpose of the universe, and for occurrences within it. The message of Islam is not new. What is new is the form of the message, its dimensions and scale. This final revelation has been preserved in its original state, as promised by God when He revealed, "Indeed, it is we who sent down the message, and indeed we will be its guardian." Indeed, it is we who sent down the message, and indeed we will be its guardian. It has miraculously remained immune to the ravages of time and the interference of man, and is still accessible in its original language to all who seek guidance. Distinct from the teachings of many religions, which assume the incompatibility of faith and reason, Islam upholds the role of the mind and regards those who fail to use reason as intellectually deficient. Again, distinct from the teachings of many religions, which assume the incompatibility of faith and reason, Islam upholds the role of the mind and regards those who fail to use reason as intellectually deficient. Because the mind tends to seek out interrelationships wherever there is variety and multiplicity, it is satisfied by the Quran's clear and unambiguous statement that everything is traceable to a single source, backed with sound arguments and evidence. Because the mind tends to seek out interrelationship wherever there is variety and multiplicity, it is satisfied by the Quran's clear and unambiguous statement that everything is traceable to a single source, backed with sound arguments and evidence. An important feature of Islam is that while it is based exclusively upon revelation from God, never exceeding the bounds of the divinely revealed text, it does not fail to provide logical proofs for its tenets. Islam teaches that one should expect a natural cause for everything that occurs in creation. It promotes the research, study, thought, and contemplation that lead one to faith by conviction rather than blind acceptance. The Quran urges man to observe and consider the signs of God within creation and provide guidelines for the sound thinking that leads to appropriate conclusions. 5. Don't all world religions have similar objectives? There are many areas in which religions agree, but there are also significant theological and practical differences between them. Undeniably, one will find in every religion expressions of wisdom, high moral values, warnings against evil, and promotion of good works. But what distinguishes Islam from other faiths is that it goes beyond simply urging people to be generous and morally upright. Islam identifies human problems and prescribes practical solutions to them, both individually and collectively. Although there are a variety of religious communities in the world, each of them content with its own version of the truth, Islam represents the completion of divinely revealed religion and the finalized legal code for mankind. For this reason, the Quran states, "Verily the religion in the sight of God is Islam." The divine messages revealed prior to that of Prophet Muhammad all called for the worship of God alone and contained some legislation. However, each of them was addressed to a specific people at a specific period of time in order to remedy particular problems and circumstances such as moral degeneration, economic injustices, and excessive materialism, misuse of power and political oppression. The final message of Islam addresses these same social evils, but as part of a comprehensive program for the amendment, reform, and benefit of every nation, community, and individual that will exist until the end of the world. The prophethood of Muhammad launched an era in which divine guidance became openly universal, more comprehensive in scope, and precisely detailed. The responsibility for man's fate and moral well-being depends completely on his own free choice and willing initiative to respond to the invitation of his Creator. Religious beliefs. 6. Do Muslims worship God or Allah? One of the biggest misconceptions about Islam concerns the name Allah. Some people believe that Muslims worship a different God than Christians, Jews, and others, and some missionary organizations distribute literature in English in which they say such things as Allah is a God of the Muslims and Muhammad told people to believe in the God Allah. They thus imply and reinforce the idea that Allah is some sort of false deity. This is totally incorrect because Allah is the same word that Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews use for God. If you pick up an Arabic Bible, you will find the word Allah wherever God is used in English. Allah is also the proper name of God. Therefore, Muslims use the name Allah even when they speak other languages. Allah is a special word. It indicates the only entity in existence who truly possesses the quality or the qualities of divinity and lordship, the creator and sustainer of the heavens and earth. It is the name of the only being worthy of worship, the one upon whom all creation is dependent at every moment. This name belongs to God alone and no one else. Allah is the only word in Arabic language equivalent to God with a capital G. Allah is the only word in Arabic language equivalent to God with a capital G. It is also a unique word grammatically since it cannot be made plural or given a masculine or feminine gender. This is consistent with the Islamic concept of God. In English and other languages, the word God can be used in various forms such as God, gods, or goddess, all with different connotations and meanings. The only difference between God, meaning a false God or any object of worship, and God with capital G, meaning the one true God, is a capital G. Thus, a more accurate translation of Allah might be the one and only true God. But there is another important point, which is that Islam is particularly concerned with the correct concept of God. Someone can have an erroneous concept of Him, whether he uses the name Allah or the word God. Followers of previous religions gradually deviated from the original pure belief in God due to the fact that their scriptures were not adequately protected from loss and alteration. None of these are still available for study in their original form or language. But this is not true of the last divinely revealed message, the Quran. Hence, the accurate concept of God can be found therein. 7. If Islam opposes idol worship, why do Muslims pray to a square structure? The simple cube-shaped stone building located in Mecca is called the Kaaba, or the sacred house. It is the point toward which Muslims face when they pray. Although Muslims face the direction of Kaaba during prayer, they do not worship it. Muslims worship and pray only to God. The Kaaba was built by the Prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael. The Kaaba was built by the Prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael in response to God's command over 4,000 years ago. Abraham consecrated the house for the worship of the one true God and invited all of humanity to visit it for that purpose. Even today, Muslims who are physically and financially able are required to make a pilgrimage to it once in a lifetime. The Kaaba has remained at the center of a continuous tradition of worship and devotion up to the present day, symbolic of permanence, constancy, and renewal. Symbolic of permanence, constancy, and renewal. There were periods in human history during which mankind deviated from the monotheism taught by God's prophets. Before the advent of Muhammad, religion among the Arabs had degenerated into polytheism and paganism, and Mecca was completely submerged in idolatry. Some 360 idols had been placed in and around the Kaaba to be worshipped there along with God. Prophet Muhammad was sent to restore to mankind the pure monotheism taught by all the messengers of God and reinstate the worship of Him alone. This he accomplished, and the Kaaba was finally cleared of all man-made deities. Among the ancient religious rites particular to the Kaaba is walking around it. This suggests the integrating and unifying power of monotheism in human life and how a Muslim's existence should revolve around a pure devotion to God. The Kaaba symbolizes the unity of all true religion, the brotherhood of all the prophets, and the essential consistency of their message. When Muslims pray facing toward this single central point, they are reminded of their common purpose and long-term goal. Even when standing directly before the Kaaba in prayer, one is not to look at it but rather at the ground before him. The spiritual focus is on God alone and never upon any created object. 8. What is the purpose and why should people worship at all? The idea of servitude has become distasteful to the modern secular mindset which concerns itself with individual liberties. Some might say that humanity has no need to worship and that doing so compromises freedom. They forget, however, that absolute freedom is neither possible or even desirable for all members of a society, and that is why every social order has its laws and restrictions. Studies in human psychology confirm that man is a worshipper by instinct, that worship is instilled in him as part of his nature, and that he tends to direct it to whatever he considers worthy, other human beings, revered customs or superstitions, materialist ideologies, or his own personal inclinations. An object of worship is that to which one devotes the greatest portion of his thought and effort. An object of worship is that to which one devotes the greatest portion of his thought and effort. So one either worships God, or he worships something other than Him, along with Him, or instead of Him. The worship of God alone is liberating in that it frees one from servitude to all else. Many people misunderstand the concept of worship, assuming that it is merely the practice of certain rituals, but in reality it includes everything done seeking the acceptance of the one worshipped. According to Islam, the worship of God means willing obedience to His orders and prohibitions, which, besides prayer and other religious obligations, include the fulfillment of promises and agreements, honesty and precision in work, teaching and counseling, encouraging righteousness, assisting others, opposing injustice, and so on. Worship is the right of the Creator upon His creation. It is based on the perception that everything was brought into existence by God and is dependent upon Him, in whose hand is life and death, benefit and harm, and the outcome of every matter. Further, it is based on the knowledge that man is an accountable being. Further, it is based on the knowledge that man is an accountable being in need of God's continuing guidance and acceptance. Islam confirms that although it is His divine right, God does not gain anything from the worship of His servants, nor is He harmed by their refusal. He ordains worship for the benefit of the worshipper himself or herself, and this benefit is obtained by him or her in both this life and the next. When a believer understands that our Creator and Sustainer deserves to be worshipped, he wants to do so because of his gratitude and love for his Lord, and because it is inherently right and correct. 9. Why only one God? Could He not create another God like Himself? The implication here is that the existence of dual or plural deities is possible, and hence probable in the view of a polytheist. However, if the questioner claims that God can create another like Himself, we ask, how can this created being be God who created all things when it has itself been created? How can it be like God since it has a beginning, whereas God has existed from eternity? In reality, the phrase create another God is an erroneous contradiction, because the mere fact that something is created means that it cannot be God. It is obviously illogical and irrational to say that something is God and cannot be God simultaneously. The other implication in this question is that if we answer He cannot, then the power of God must be limited, negating His divinity. These suggestions are not valid because the absolute and unlimited power of God pertains to what is rationally possible and not what is rationally impossible. So when we say no, which is correct, it does not mean that the power of God is limited. Rather, it affirms the perfection of His power, meaning that He is not incapable of doing anything that is rationally possible. Our minds cannot grasp the extent of His power, nor can our imaginations. Therefore, we must admit our inability to contain the essence and nature of God within the limits of our intellect. 10. What is the purpose of our creation? Non-believers are unable to provide any convincing reason for the existence of this universe or of a human life. People who believe there is a creator assume that creation occurred by His will. People who believe there is a creator assume that creation occurred by His will. But in a world where everything is shown to have a purpose, it is natural for a human being to wonder about the purpose of his own creation. One is surely justified in expecting the Creator who put us on this earth to inform us why He did so and what He expects of us. The Quran informs us that He did that. He did just that. The Quran informs us that He did just that. It says God created us for a test here on earth, conveying His words. It says God created us for a test here on earth, conveying His words. Then did you think that He created you uselessly? Then did you think that we created you? Then did you think that we created you uselessly, and that to us you would not be returned? An unbeliever might decide that the objective of his life will be to collect wealth, obtain position, or pursue pleasure to the greatest extent possible, but none of this will benefit him in the long run. According to his final scripture, God created man to test him with certain responsibilities. He did not intend life on this earth to necessarily be comfortable or satisfying, but merely a trial of limited duration. the punishment and rewards of which will be due in the hereafter. As mentioned previously, most of creation is Muslim in that it is programmed to obey the physical laws set by God, and this is why the universe functions with balanced equilibrium. Man, however, was given a free will and the ability to either obey or disobey. But God will not allow his universal balance to be upset indefinitely by defiant, corrupt, and sinful people, so he only grants human beings a measure of freedom in a temporary world. The scheme of birth, development, decline, and death provides each with the opportunity to prove to himself without a doubt what he will deserve on the day of judgment, which God created for the manifestation of his ultimate justice. The scheme of birth, development, decline, and death provides each with the opportunity to prove to himself or herself without a doubt that he will deserve what he will deserve on the day of judgment, which God created for the manifestation of his ultimate justice. This life is very meaningful and purposeful to the believing Muslim because he realizes that it will determine his outcome and permanent position in the next life. He lives to earn the approval of his Creator in preparation for the final return to him. We all recognize that people make things to perform specific functions for them, in other words, to serve them. God has made us to serve him, but with one major difference: it is not for the benefit of the Creator himself, but for the benefit of us, his creation. The purpose of our existence is thus stated in the Quran: I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. But man's worship of God is not automatic like the vast majority of created beings, but by his own choice and effort, and this is what entitles him or her to honor and reward. How should one worship God in order to fulfill that purpose? This question can undoubtedly best be answered by him. God has provided every element of his creation, living and inanimate, with guidance. We can thus expect that he would provide us with guidance as well. His revelation instructs humanity what to do, what to avoid, and the reason for it. It informs man what is expected of him or her, how to accomplish it, and the results of continual positive effort. Through Prophet Muhammad, God revealed to man the ways of worship suitable to his physical and psychological nature and individual talents, and in harmony with his particular role on the earth. These, in combination, are what enables him or her to fulfill the purpose of his or her creation. 11. How do you know there is life after death? We live in a world that demands logic and proof, and is not content with only belief. Someone might wonder how a rational, practical-minded person could believe in life after death. People tend to assume that anyone who believes in the hereafter does so on the basis of a blind faith. But in fact, belief in the hereafter is completely logical, and it is the only way the injustices of this world can be reconciled with a just and all-powerful Creator. We know that in addition to physical pleasures and comforts, there are certain ideal conditions that human beings instinctively desire and strive to attain, such as love, respect, security, and contentment. Though many people are able to acquire a portion of these objectives here on earth, there remains one that is largely unobtainable, and that is justice. Most people hold the conviction that life is not fair, that they have often been misunderstood or not appreciated, that in some way they have been harmed, cheated, or oppressed. Daily newscasts disclose the killing, torture, displacement, and starvation of countless innocent people by powerful tyrants and nations, lives ruined by the vicious or careless acts of others or by natural disasters, and the poor and helpless being subjected to theft and deception. Seldom is even partial justice ever restored. Yet every human being desires justice. Even if he does not seek it for others, he certainly wants justice for himself or herself. So why has the Creator instilled in man a longing for something he cannot experience in this world? The answer is that this life is only one portion of his existence, and that the logical conclusion which restores the equilibrium found in all creation, is in the hereafter. It is there that every person will be fully and precisely compensated for his or her good and evil deeds. This is a perfect and absolute justice which God has promised all people. The present life is a trial in preparation for the next realm of existence. The explanation given by the Quran about the necessity of life after death is what the moral consciousness of man demands. If there was no life after death, the belief in God would be meaningless, or it would be a belief in some kind of indifferent and negligent deity who, after having created the human race, is no longer concerned with its welfare. But certainly God is just. He will indeed punish the tyrants who have killed thousands and caused suffering to their families, corrupted institutions and societies, enslaved people and nations, robbed, deprived, and plundered. And what about those who patiently endured so much injustice and hardship, suffered to uphold truth, saved lives, or sacrificed in order to assist many people? What earthly compensations could possibly restore the balance for them? This can only take place in an eternal life where every individual affected in the least by someone's actions will testify for or against him, and where the innermost thoughts and intentions known completely to God will be judged precisely and perfectly. Since man's term of life in this world is limited, and because numerous individuals are affected by one's actions, adequate rewards and punishments are impossible in the present life. Since man's term of life in this world is limited, and because numerous individuals are affected by one's actions, adequate rewards and punishments are impossible in the present life. The Quran states categorically that the day of resurrection must come, and that God will then decree the fate of each soul according to its record of deeds. Additionally, God has stated in the Quran that the present creation is in itself a clear proof that He is able to create and recreate as He wills, whatever He wills, however He wills, and whenever He wills, for God originates and repeats creation with equal ease. Consider these words revealed to His final prophet. Say, travel through the land and observe how He began creation. Then Allah will produce the final creation. Did we fail in the first creation? But they are in confusion over a new creation. Is not He who created the heavens and the earth able to create the likes of them? Yes, and He is the knowing Creator. Do they not see that Allah who created the heavens and earth and did not fail in their creation is able to give life to the dead? Does man not remember that we created him before while he was nothing? And you have already known the first creation, so will you not remember? Have they not considered how Allah begins creation and then repeats it? Indeed, that for Allah is easy, and it is He who begins creation, then He repeats it, and that is easier for Him. As we began the first creation, we will repeat it. That is a promise binding upon us. Indeed, we will do it. In fact, the material of creation is already in existence, merely to be developed once again at His command. Observable evidence of this ongoing process is now being presented regularly by astronomers and specialists in other fields of modern science. 12. Are the good deeds of non-believers rewarded? Prophet Muhammad disclosed that God rewards according to the intention of each individual. The non-believer expects to be rewarded for his deeds in the present life because he denies or doubts the existence of another life after his death. Thus he is keen that people should recognize what he does. When he is praised, and his deed publicized, he is pleased, for this is the reward he sought. He might also obtain a sum of money in payment for it, or a prize. This is the compensation he likes most, and God grants it to him. But he is not given additional reward in the hereafter simply because he neither desired it nor worked for it. The believer, on the other hand is not duly concerned with compensation in this life because he is striving for the greater eternal reward of the hereafter. He does so by worshipping God as he stipulated and by working patiently, honestly, and correctly to the best of his ability, even when no person appreciates his efforts. Because his deeds are done seeking God's acceptance, they are appreciated by him and rewarded. Islam teaches that there are two conditions for God's approval and reward of any deed. One, that it is done explicitly for his acceptance and approval, and two, that it is consistent with the methods ordained by him. In other words, a person must work for God according to the terms he has specified and not according to his own preferences or those of others. In order to know exactly what God expects of his servants, it is necessary to refer to the legislation revealed by him in its final form through Muhammad, the final prophet, peace be upon him. 13. Why should someone be a Muslim? Can't we follow any religion we please? There are many people who follow the teachings of a religion as best they can, and others who believe in God in some way without practicing any formal religion. Many have abandoned the thought that there could be any true religion because nearly all religions claim to be true, and some allow that all religions are legitimate paths to God and are acceptable to him. So how is Islam different from other religions? Islam has several unique features which can be confirmed through deeper study. Islam is the only religion whose sources have remained free of a human alteration and interference. Its divinely revealed scripture is in harmony with established facts of science, clearly bearing the signature of the creator of this universe. Islam provides answers to the essential fundamental questions which occur to the mind of every intelligent person, those related to the purpose of creation and life, and concerning a further existence after death. Islam is the only religion which insists upon worship of the Creator alone and completely rejects the worship of any aspect of creation. Islam dispenses with all the intermediaries between man and God and allows every individual to contact him directly or contact God directly, thus eliminating religious hierarchies and other sources of exploitation which have characterized the history of religions throughout the ages. In Islam, no clerk or establishment can come between a person and his creator. While monotheistic faiths share a fundamental belief in God, their understanding of him differs greatly. Islam declares that God is unique and in no way similar to any of his creation, nor does he merge with it in any form. His attributes are those of complete and absolute perfection, without the slightest deficiency or limitation. Unlike other religions and ideologies which emphasize some aspects of a human nature at the expense of others, Islam accommodates the physical, intellectual, and spiritual aspects of man. Islam beliefs and practices are natural and appeal to common sense. They present a balanced program of life that fulfills both physical and spiritual needs. Islam prohibits blind following without knowledge and is based upon evidence and logic. The rational mind is the basis for religious accountability and responsibility. All aspects of Islamic belief are clear without any obscurity or ambiguity. It contains no tenet that contradicts reason or observable reality, and it calls on people to study and contemplate as a means of strengthening faith. Islam's religious, moral, economic, political, and social ethics are permanent and remain constant. They are governed by a set of unchanging principles which include such universal values as justice, freedom, equality, brotherhood, and social responsibility. History provides an outstanding example in the model Islamic society established by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, and maintained for decades by devoted Muslims, where truth and transparency, justice and compassion were implemented as a vital expression of the religion. Footnote: anyone to whom God's message was not adequately conveyed, yet believed in him and tried to worship him with sincere intention, will be judged by God according to what is in his heart and mind, for he is the ultimate judge of all affairs. The Quran states that God never punishes a people until after he has sent them a messenger with a clear order to worship their Creator alone without any associates. It also states that he does not punish for what people are unable to know or what is beyond their capability. Islam also declares that it is the religion of truth, for this is stated unambiguously in the Quran. However, the Creator does not force His preference on anyone. He wants people to accept right guidance by their own choice and free will, because that is what makes them worthy of His approval and reward. The Quran states, "There is no compulsion in accepting religion. The truth has been made distinct from falsehood. Had Allah willed, He would have made you one nation united in religion, but He intended to test you in what He has given you. So hasten to all that is good. To Allah is your return altogether, and He will then inform you concerning that over which you used to differ." 14. Isn't Islam fatalistic? Muslims know that all things are from God and occur by His will. Thus they tend to worry less about material matters and view the life of this world in a proper perspective. A Muslim believer relies completely on God and knows that whatever happens is always for the best, whether he recognizes it or not, so he graciously accepts whatever cannot be changed. However, this doesn't mean that a Muslim sits around awaiting destiny and takes no positive action in life. On the contrary, Islam demands action and effort to change every undesirable situation, and this is a requirement of the faith. It totally rejects the teaching that one should not go to a doctor when ill, but only pray to God for a cure. If human beings had no ability to act, God could not justly expect them to do and not to do certain things. Far from being fatalistic, Islam teaches that man's main obligation in life is to exert effort in obedience to God, which includes seeking benefit and avoiding harm. Islam teaches that human beings should take positive action in life and supplement it with prayer. Some people are lazy and careless and then blame the negative result on destiny or fate. Some even say that if God had willed, they would not have sinned or committed crimes. All this is entirely incorrect, because He has provided complete guidance and instruction on how to live and has ordered upright conduct at all times. God has not ordered anything that man cannot do or prohibited anything he cannot avoid, because His justice is complete and perfect. Each individual is held responsible within the limits of his own ability, but not beyond it. Although our deeds and our destiny are decreed by God and known to Him, it does not mean He compels us to do anything. Rather, He will to give us options about our course of action, and thus whatever decisions we make are within the framework of His will. God knows what every person will choose to do and then allows him to do it, while not necessarily approving of his choice. While He does not call anyone to account for what is beyond His control, human beings are indeed responsible for every free choice they make, and they will find the consequences of their choices and actions in both this life and the next. Cause and effect is a natural law created by God to be utilized by His creatures. It is the law by which one's destiny is determined. So the destiny of each individual is predetermined by God, but it is also the direct result and consequence of his or her own choices and actions, and this is what the Creator has willed and decreed. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Clear your doubts about Islam. 50 answers to common questions. Compiled by Sahih International. Page 19, question 15. Are there sects in Islam? Are there sects in Islam? Islam is one path, has one direction, and is based on one methodology, that which Prophet Muhammad taught according to the instruction he received from God. The religion ordained for mankind was meant to be a unifying factor. In fact, He addressed mankind in the Quran saying, "And this is my path, which is straight, so follow it and do not follow other ways, for they will separate you from His way." This divine command emphatically makes it binding on all Muslims to be united as one community of believers. Thus, all forms of schism and sectarianism are un-Islamic. The Prophet's companions and following generations adhered very closely to the path of God, and thus He protected them from separating in this manner. But with later generations, certain factors led to the emergence of divisions and divergence among them, increasing concern with worldly affairs, the influence of non-Muslim cultures, among them increasing concern with worldly affairs, the influence of non-Muslim cultures, and political rivalries. Initially, some small groups split off from the path adhered to by the majority of Muslims. They introduced innovations into the religion and followed opinions differing from the original teachings of the Prophet. These schisms were rejected and opposed by the recognized scholars of Islam and the majority of Muslims, which meant that initially they were contained and that their influence did not become widespread during the major part of Islamic history. The majority of Muslims remained on the Sunni path, and a Sunni is one who takes his religion from the Quran and the Sunnah, i.e. the authentically narrated teachings of Prophet Muhammad as practiced by him and his righteous followers. So the majority of the Muslims remained on the Sunni path, and whenever forms of deviation emerged among them, the pious scholars always hastened to oppose them and point out their error. Prophet Muhammad foretold that such divergences would emerge. He warned against schism and instructed Muslims to remain within the main body of Islam. Nevertheless, over the centuries, a number of people have deviated and corrupted their religion, forming sects that claim to belong to Islam but whose stated beliefs are clearly contrary to Islam. Some have distorted the concept of God and attributed to Him what is unfitting or incompatible with His divine status, claiming, for example, that everything in existence is God, or that He is incarnate or present within His creation, while the Quran states that He is superior to His creation and distinct from it. And some have been misguided regarding various major tenets of Islam to the degree that they no longer submit to God and obey Him, while others have innovated and changed some of the prescribed forms of worship. Those sects which deviated from mainstream Islam are not the same as the schools of Islamic jurisprudence, which are the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali schools, and a few others less known. So those sects which deviated from mainstream Islam are not the same as the schools of Islamic jurisprudence, which developed within it and are based on the immutable principles of the faith. These eminent schools of thought have provided a vision of the highest degree of scholarship for Islamic legislation and serve to complement one another. Differences and disagreements within the framework of Islam do not become matters of partisanship and intolerance except among the extremely ignorant. Islam recognizes the individuality of human beings and that not all diversity of opinion and difference in analysis is negative. However, the kind of dissension that leads to divisions and sectarianism has been denounced in the Quran. Indeed, those who have divided their religion and become sects, you, O Muhammad, are not associated with them in anything. Their affair is only left to Allah. Then He will inform them about what they used to do. Although Muslims now appear to be divided more than ever before, the number of divisions in Islam remain fewer than in other religions. One can still find many Islamic associations calling people to truth, proclaiming God's original message, and warning against that which is contrary to it. Salvation does not depend on affiliation with any specific group, but rather on true faith proven by obedience to God and upright conduct in the manner revealed by Him. Prophets and Scriptures. Question 16. Who was Muhammad? Muhammad ibn Abdullah was a descendant of Prophet Abraham through his son Ishmael and was from the prominent Arab tribe of Quraysh. He was not the founder of Islam but its final prophet and the last messenger sent by God to the world as a mercy to mankind. Every detail of his private life and public speech has been documented and carefully preserved up to the present day. During the 23-year period of his prophethood, he changed the entire Arabian Peninsula from paganism to worship of the one true God, from tribal warfare to national unity, from anarchy to disciplined living, from barbarism to the highest standard of moral excellence. At the time of his death, most inhabitants of Arabia and the southern regions of Iraq and Palestine had voluntarily embraced Islam. At the time of his death, most inhabitants of Arabia and the southern regions of Iraq and Palestine had voluntarily embraced Islam. To posterity, he left a creed of pure monotheism that included comprehensive legislation based on a balanced system of moral values. No other man in history excelled in so many different aspects of life. He not only taught and established the religion, but founded a state, initiated numerous political and social reforms, built a powerful and dynamic society, and completely revolutionized the realm of human thought and behavior, all within just over 2 decades. His coming was foretold in previous scriptures. His coming was foretold in previous scriptures, and he was described therein. The honest and open-minded among the Jews and Christians recognized him from those descriptions and believed in his message. But the message he communicated was not meant for a particular people, place, or period. It was a global message. Muhammad was appointed to instruct all of mankind and invite humanity to the same objective as did the prophets before him, the worship of God alone, without associates or intermediaries. There is explicit evidence for the prophethood of Muhammad. As the revelation descended upon him, his companions noticed certain effects on his body. However, he never lost consciousness or showed any signs of illness. His life was protected by God during times of severe danger throughout the entire period of his prophethood until the divine message was complete. Like the prophets before him, Muhammad was supported with miracles, but by far the greatest of them was the Quran, an eternal miracle containing evidences for people of intellect for all time to come. Prophet Muhammad was chosen by the Creator of the universe and of mankind to invite all people to correct beliefs and the pure way of life preferred by him, and to demonstrate the measures and methods leading to his acceptance. He spared no effort and no sacrifice in carrying out this duty for the benefit of mankind. Through him, God made known truth from falsehood and wisdom from error, and through him he showed man how to attain eternal paradise. Thus, Prophet Muhammad directed humanity to the one divine source of values and rules of conduct. Question 17. Do Muslims worship Muhammad? Islam is based on uncompromising monotheism. God alone is to be worshipped and nothing else, so Muslims cannot worship Muhammad or any other human being. The basis for this misconception actually comes from the early Orientalists who called Islam Mohammedanism, implying that Muslims worship Muhammad. Like all prophets, he was a man, and despite his extraordinary accomplishments, he never claimed divine status. Rather, he always maintained that he was human like everyone else, that he spoke nothing of his own accord, and that the Quran was a message from God revealed to him by God, to whom alone belongs all glory and praise. He never took personal credit for any success. All the principles he taught, the legislation he pronounced, and the great achievements for which he could have attained personal renown and advantage were attributed to the guidance and support of God alone. Muslims strive to follow the example of Prophet Muhammad. Additionally, Islam teaches Muslims to respect all of God's prophets and messengers. However, respecting and loving them does not mean worshipping them. For all forms of worship must be directed only to the Creator. Muhammad was himself a devout worshipper of God. He gave away everything he obtained in charity, fasted often, and would spend a great portion of the night in a prayer. He was constantly aware of his Lord, remembering him in every situation, and his words of praise and supplication reflected the highest degree of sincerity and servitude. His entire life was dedicated to the cause of God. He called on people to worship God alone and insisted that they refer to him as merely a servant of God, telling his followers, "Do not exaggerate in praise of me, as the Christians did with Jesus, son of Mary. I am only his servant. So say the servant of Allah and his messenger." Question 18. Why should Muhammad be the final prophet? Haven't there been others after him? Prophethood is not something acquired by a person who proves himself worthy, nor is it granted in recognition of piety. Prophethood is an office to which God appoints a man in order to fill a particular need. The Quran mentions 4 conditions under which prophets were sent to the world. 1. When no prophet had ever been sent to a people before and no divine message had reached them. 2. When the message of an earlier prophet had been forgotten by the people, or the teachings of former prophets had been altered with time. 3. When a second prophet was needed to assist a first one. 4. When a people had not yet received complete instruction from God. In each of these cases, a prophet was appointed to convey divine revelation, updating previous messages and correcting deviations that man had introduced into the religion of God. After God's message was completed through revelation to Muhammad and its preservation guaranteed, there was no further need for messengers to convey revelation, only for teachers and reformers to remind people of what God had revealed. From the time of Muhammad's prophethood, conditions in the world have been conducive to the transmission of God's message to all civilizations, making the appointment of additional prophets unnecessary. This final message has undergone no amendment or alteration by man. Not a single word has been added to it or deleted from it. If God intended to send another prophet after Muhammad, he would have made that fact clear in the Quran, or commanded his messenger to declare that a prophet would follow him. But the Quran clearly affirms that God has now completed his divine mission through Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Therefore, the office of prophethood has been cancelled, enabling the world to unite in allegiance to the final prophet and obedience to God. For everyone who accepts Muhammad as the divinely appointed final messenger will seek instruction only within the message he conveyed. For everyone who accepts Muhammad as the divinely appointed final messenger will seek instruction only within the message he conveyed. Question 19. Before going to the question 19, I will go to the footnotes. The Quran states Muhammad is not the father of any one of your men, but he is a messenger of Allah and seal, i.e. last of the prophets. Chapter 33, verse 40. Also in another footnote, God stated therein, "This day I have perfected for you your religion and completed my favor upon you and have approved for you Islam as religion." Chapter 5, verse 3. Now let's go back to question 19. Didn't Muhammad write the Quran or borrow from the earlier scriptures? Opponents of Islam sometimes allege that Muhammad himself wrote the Quran or that he copied or adapted it from previous scriptures. But it is known that the Prophet's contacts with Jews and Christians was negligible before his immigration from Mecca, and after it, his role was that of a teacher, openly inviting the Jews and Christians to accept Islam while pointing out how they had diverged from the true monotheism taught by their prophets. It is true that there are some similarities between the Quran and the Bible, but this does not indicate that later prophets plagiarized from former ones. It merely reflects the common source, which is the Creator of mankind, and the continuance of his basic message of monotheism. Moreover, there was no Arabic version of the Bible in existence at the time of Prophet Muhammad. The earliest Arabic version of the Old Testament is that of are Sadayas Gaon, are Sadayas Gaon of 900 CE, more than 250 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad. And the oldest Arabic version of the New Testament was published by Erpenius in 1616 CE, about 1000 years after his death. Historically and logically, it cannot be established that there was any human source for the Quran, or that the Messenger of Allah learned it from the Jews or Christians. His enemies kept a close watch on him, hoping to find confirmation of their claim that he was a liar, but they could not point to a single instance when the Prophet might have had secret meetings with people of other faiths. It was a sign of Muhammad's prophethood that he was illiterate, thus he could not be credited with composing or editing the revelations, and suspicion that he learned what he preached from earlier scripture is eliminated. At the time the Quran was revealed, his contemporaries among the Arabs, known for linguistic eloquence, acknowledged that its language was unique and distinctly different from the speech of Muhammad, a man they knew well. The Quran states that the Prophet was an unlettered man, so if that had not been true, his opponents would surely have exposed him. There is, however, not a single report to this effect, and no one denied his illiteracy. At the same time, no one denied that the Quran was unequaled in eloquence, impact, and clarity, including those who rejected its message. It is not difficult to verify that Muhammad did not possess knowledge of many things mentioned in the Quran, such as historical events, natural phenomena, and future occurrences. The kind of information he conveyed could not have been obtained through reading and research, so it was obviously something that could only have come directly from the Creator. The Quran states in several places that Muhammad and his people did not know these facts, so had it been otherwise, his adversaries would have capitalized on that claim to discredit him. Only recently, within the last 2 centuries, have advancements in research technology led to the discovery of facts that were mentioned in the Quran by the unlettered Prophet over 14 centuries ago. Here are a few examples. The creation of the universe from a single entity, and of life from water. Have those who disbelieved not considered that the heavens and the earth were a joint or a joined entity, and we separated them and made from water every living thing? Quran chapter 21 verse 30. All creation is based on duality, made up of pairs, counterparts, or opposites. And of all things we created 2 mates. Quran 51 verse 49. In contrast, God is one with no counterpart and nothing resembling him in any way. The different natures of the sun and moon. It is He, Allah, who made the sun a shining light and the moon a derived light, and determined for it phases, that you may know the number of years and account of time. Quran chapter 10 verse 5. Other verses 25, 61 and 71, 16 refer to the sun as a burning lamp. The rotation of the earth. He created the heavens and earth in truth. He wraps the night over the day and wraps the day over the night. Quran 39 verse 5. The alternate wrapping of sunlight and darkness is caused by the earth's turning in one direction. The expansion of the universe and the heaven we constructed with strength, and indeed we are its expander. Quran chapter 51 verse 47. The Creator refers to himself in the plural form, which denotes power, grandeur, and majesty. The sun is not stationary, but moves in a specific direction for a limited term, and the sun runs on course toward its stopping point. Verse 36 chapter 36 verse 38, the sun as a tiny member of this vast universe is progressing within it toward the final destination, which indicates an end to the present creation. These are words recited by Muhammad, the unlettered prophet. The Quran addresses recently established scientific facts with the precision of a scientist. Could the most highly literate, well-read, or scholarly man of that period, or even of the centuries that followed, possibly have come up with anything similar? Question number 20. How does the Quran differ from other scriptures? The Quran was revealed over 1400 years ago. It states in no uncertain terms that it is a revelation from God conveyed by the angel Gabriel to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It is regarded not only by Muslims but by scholars of religion and historians as the most authentic religious text in existence today. Unlike earlier scriptures, the Quran has been preserved unchanged in its original Arabic text since the time of revelation, as God had promised within it. Its preservation was guaranteed when God revealed, "Indeed, it is we who sent down the message, and indeed we will be its guardian." Chapter 15 verse 9. Note: God often refers to himself in the Quran as we, which does not denote plurality but rather power and majesty. History witnessed the fulfillment of that promise, for the book of God remains to date exactly as it was revealed to the Prophet and recited by him. Immediately memorized and recorded by large numbers of his companions, it was passed on in exactly the same form by thousands of Muslims generation after generation up until the present day. The Quran of today is literally the same scripture as was revealed to Prophet Muhammad. There is no other book in the history of man that has been memorized precisely and accurately, word for word, letter for letter, by millions of people over the centuries. This in itself is a miracle. There is only one verse of the Quran. The same revealed words continue to be read, recited, and memorized in their original Arabic language by Muslims throughout the world. Translations of the meanings into other languages assist in understanding but cannot be called the Quran, as this term refers only to the actual revealed words of God. The Quran contains God's final message to humanity and legislation, which encompasses all spheres of a human life. It is suited to all peoples and all times. It appeals to logic, following clear reasoning and citing evidences from the created universe, from history, and from the human soul to establish not only the existence of God but also his uniqueness and absolute perfection. It also contains answers to the questions which naturally occur to the human mind about the purpose of creation and what occurs after death. It is the primary source of the Islamic creed and its legislation, but in addition to religious guidance, it contains numerous verses that speak of the universe, its components and phenomena: the earth, sun, moon, stars, mountains, wind, rivers and seas, plants, animals, and successive stages of a human development. As can be seen from examples in the previous chapter, the Quran speaks with the perfect knowledge of the Creator about his creation. Being the final revelation to mankind, God has made the Quran a continuing miracle containing evidences to be uncovered gradually as humans increase in knowledge of their universe. But its main purpose is to guide mankind as to how one should relate to his Creator, to his fellow men, and to the universe in general. It outlines the practical methods of earning the approval of God and obtaining peace and contentment in the permanent existence to come. By following its guidance, man can fully experience his human worth and his special position among created beings. The Quran was revealed containing complete guidance in all matters of faith and its application to the affairs of a human life in order that everyone might attain the happiness and contentment of this world and the next. Question 21. Is it true that Muslims do not believe in Jesus? What does Islam say about him? One cannot be a Muslim if he does not believe in Jesus as well as all other prophets sent by God. The Quran names 25 prophets and messengers and suggests that there were many more. So one cannot be a Muslim if he does not believe in Jesus as well as all other prophets sent by God, including Adam, Noah, Abraham, David, Solomon, Moses, and Muhammad. Muslims have the highest regard for Jesus and await his second coming. The Islamic view of Jesus is one between two extremes. The Jews rejected his prophethood and called him an impostor, while many Christians regard him as the Son of God and worship him as such. Islam considers Jesus Christ, the son of Mary, as one of the great prophets of God, worthy of respect and honor, but not worship. He was sent to confirm and renew the basic doctrine of belief in God alone and obedience to him. According to the Quran, he was born miraculously without a father. He was born miraculously without a father, and you find this to chapter 19, verses 16 to 35. And he was not crucified but raised up to God, and he was not crucified but raised up to God. And you find this referred to Quran to chapter 3, verse 55, and chapter 4, verses 157 to 158. The Quran attributes to him miracles that are not even mentioned in the Bible. However, Islam sees the deification of Jesus as a reversion to paganism, and the divinity of Jesus is categorically rejected within the Quran's text. Refer to chapter 5, verse 72. Such doctrines as the Muslims simply as Trinity, such doctrines as the Trinity, divine sonship, and atonement are not accepted by Muslims simply because they did not originate from. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Clear your doubts about Islam, 50 answers to common questions, compiled by Sahih International. Question 35. Why is so much of the Muslim world underdeveloped? No one can deny that the Muslim world has been in decline for several centuries, the causes of which go back into history. In the Muslim nation's early stages, wealth, centers of learning, and public works were abundant. But affluence, excessive concern with worldly life, and the spread of corruption eventually weakened religious consciousness. The inevitable result of these human failures was an ebb in conversions to Islam. The inevitable result of these human failures was an ebb in conversions to Islam and territorial expansion, losses sustained in East Asia and Europe, the ascension of Western power and influence, and a change from an ascendant to a defensive posture. The present backwardness of most Muslim societies, their political degradation, and their people suffering in spite of their human and material resources and of Islam's noble values and principles, is the unfortunate reality of the present day. The calamities that befell the Muslim world after the period of its early expansion, eventually leading to the fall of the Caliphate, cannot be attributed to Islamic thought or even entirely to errors in political leadership. The prophetic period and that of the early caliphs which followed presented the best example for all succeeding generations. However, the rapid influx of new peoples and nations into the community of Islam before they were properly educated as to Islamic objectives and values resulted in a later political leadership that never developed and matured as it should have. The Islamic vision became obscured and its spirit reduced to mere form, empty words, and a heritage venerated but seriously misunderstood by later generations. The natural trend of the Islamic legal system to expand was arrested, and the vital physical sciences, economics, sociology, and political thought, all essential aspects of previous development, were neglected. At the same time, the Muslim world was becoming increasingly weak and vulnerable. Europe was beginning to benefit from the achievements of Islamic scholarship and assert itself. The fact that most Muslim regions of the world were then conquered, dominated, and exploited by Western colonial powers for some time is not an excuse that is condoned by Islam. Rather, it was the natural outcome of the widespread neglect and failure by Muslims to conscientiously and comprehensively adhere to the teachings of their religion. The importance of obtaining knowledge and working conscientiously with determination was made clear by the Prophet of Islam. Muslims are taught that because man has been given a certain amount of free will, it must be exercised properly in accordance with Islamic teachings to earn approval of the Creator. This in itself is motivation for Muslims to be the most knowledgeable and productive people possible. If Muslim societies today are not meeting their potential, it is surely not due to Islam, rather it is from their ignorance of the religion and failure to apply and practice it. 36. Question number 36. If Islam is such a good religion, why do we find many Muslims dishonest, unreliable, and lazy? Islam came as a message of guidance from God to all creation at a time when ignorance and corruption were universal. It opened people's minds and souls to learning, development, refinement, and morality. The achievements of Islamic thought in that early period were sufficient to bring light, guidance, and knowledge to humanity. However, as among every other people, there are indeed some Muslims who are heedless, undependable, corrupt, and selfish, and the media projects this stereotype about Muslims in particular. It can be readily noted that whenever an adherent to any other faith commits a crime, the media seldom brings up the issue of religion, but when a Muslim is involved, it is Islam that is blamed and portrayed in a negative light before public opinion. The fact cannot be denied that many Muslims today are unmindful of the teachings of the religion, due either to a lack of religious knowledge or to various worldly inducements and attractions. But even if one recognizes that some Muslims may be dishonest, immoral, or impulsive, he should not judge Islam by its non-conforming or disobedient members, but rather by those who conscientiously adhere to its teachings, since Islam categorically forbids such evils as lying, cheating, and negligence. The wrongdoer must be blamed for his crimes rather than the religion. One should instead examine the system itself and understand its principles and disregard the acts of those who have serious deficiencies in their knowledge, beliefs, and practice. While today's Muslim societies are not model ones by any means, they still enjoy a comparatively stable family life, absence of delinquency, low crime rates, greater freedom from drugs and alcoholism, as well as the warmth of brotherhood, generosity, and mutual aid. It may be observed that taken as a whole, the Muslim community produces the best citizens in any society. As a matter of religious observance, the majority avoids the consumption of alcohol and drugs, eliminating many intoxicant-related crimes. Collectively, Muslims are the community which gives the maximum amount of charity in the world, and no community can equal Muslims where modesty, sobriety, and human ethics are concerned. Islam may be fairly and justly assessed not by negative stereotypes portrayed by the media, but by what its authentic sources contain and by the practice of the most excellent follower of the religion, Prophet Muhammad. There have been a number of unbiased non-Muslim historians who have declared that Muhammad was an exemplary human being. It is his pattern of life that demonstrates the true Islamic ideal, an example to be followed by Muslims. Question 37. What is Islam's view about education, science, and technology? The framework of Islamic thought represents a comprehensive view of life and the universe. A Muslim is therefore required to acquire both religious and worldly knowledge. In fact, Islam advocated knowledge at a time when the whole world was engulfed in ignorance. In a matter of years, the early generation of Muslims became a learned and refined people, for Islam had awakened in them the faculty of intellect. Those early Muslims understood from the teachings of their religion that useful knowledge is necessary for the benefit of the self and of humanity. Hence, they pursued it to such a degree that they surpassed other nations in development and productivity and carried the torch of civilization for many centuries. Muslim history abounds with examples of scientific and cultural ingenuity. Muslims inherited the knowledge of the nations that came before them, developed it, and placed it in the context of a precise moral framework. Muslim scholarship made a vital contribution to the enrichment and advancement of human civilization. While Europe was still in the Dark Ages, religious Muslims were making great advances in the fields of medicine, mathematics, physics, astronomy, geography, architecture, literature, and history, documentation, to mention but a few. Many important new procedures were transmitted to medieval Europe from Muslim regions, such as Arabic numerals, with the principle of the zero vital to the advancement of mathematics and the use of algebra. Sophisticated instruments, including the astrolabe and the quadrant, as well as good navigational maps, were first developed by Muslim. Only after people lost sight of their religious beliefs and obligations did the scientific achievements of the Muslim world cease and fall into obscurity. Similarly, Islam does not now oppose any modern inventions that are beneficial to mankind. It is sufficient that they be used in the name of God and for His cause. In reality, machines, instruments, and devices have no religion or homeland. In reality, machines, instruments, and devices have no religion or homeland. They can be used for either good or bad objectives, and the way they are used can affect much of the Earth's population. Even something so simple as a glass can be filled either with a nourishing drink or with a poison. Television can provide education or immorality. It is up to the user to decide, and a Muslim is commanded to make good use of all the means at his disposal while being prohibited from causing harm to himself or herself or others. Failure to use the proper means toward benefit is in effect a deprecation of Islamic teachings. A truly Islamic government is required to the best of its ability to provide all means that promote adequate education for its citizens. Education is a right for all individuals and the required moral duty of every capable Muslim. All able, intelligent, and skilled individuals in an Islamic society are required to educate themselves not only in the basics of their religion but in necessary worldly affairs. Further, it is obligatory upon qualified people to study every beneficial field of knowledge. For example, since every society needs doctors, it becomes obligatory for some people to go into the field of medicine to fulfill the needs of society. Advancements in science and technology are among the ways and means to achieve development of the Muslim world. Islam calls upon Muslims to pursue knowledge in the broadest sense of the word. Prophet Muhammad said, seeking knowledge is an obligation upon every Muslim. He also said, for one who treads the path to knowledge, Allah will make easy the path to paradise. And the Quran contains numerous references to knowledge and its importance, such as, indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day are signs for those of understanding. Say, are those who know equal to those who do not know? Allah will raise those who have believed among you and those who were given knowledge by degrees. Quranic verses encourage study and contemplation of the universe that surrounds us and is particularly concerned with these sciences that give human beings the ability to benefit from the world around them. While encouraging investigation, the Quran contains references to a variety of subjects which have been shown to be scientifically accurate. This is a fulfillment of God's statement over 14 centuries ago. We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. Thus, when a Muslim has a sincere and wholesome intention to obtain knowledge, it will also have a positive effect on his faith, for knowledge reinforces textual evidence for the existence of the Almighty Creator and assists in appreciation of the many scientific allusions found in the Quran. There has never been an established scientific fact that contradicted the teachings of Islam. Whatever modern science discovers only increases a Muslim's knowledge of God's magnificent creation. Thus, Islam actively encourages scientific endeavors and the study of God's signs in nature. It also welcomes beneficial technological advances and allows people to enjoy the fruits of a human ingenuity. To a Muslim, conflict between science and religion is an impossibility, for religion comes from God and so does His system of creation and development. The modern, purely materialistic approach to scientific and technological advancement has indeed granted man a measure of physical comfort, but not a mental or spiritual comfort. Islam advocates the incorporation of knowledge within a just and balanced value system where anything beneficial for one's spiritual and worldly improvement is encouraged and advocated. Question 38. Does Islam accept slavery? Sometimes people ask why Islam did not abolish slavery. They tend to forget that other religions did not do so either. In fact, there are several passages in the Bible that order slaves to serve their masters well. It is well known that when Europe made contact with Africa, the black people of that continent were faced with a major calamity of a human misery that lasted more than 5 centuries. Slavery was not abolished worldwide until the year 1953 through a resolution issued by the United Nations. At the time of the Quran's revelation, slavery was a universal institution upon which the economies of every civilization were dependent. There were many ways by which a slave could be obtained, such as poverty, forcing one to sell himself or herself or his children into slavery; debt, when a debtor could not pay off his debt, he became a slave; kidnapping and raids. Islam limited the sources that existed previously to one; the capture of enemy prisoners during war, and all others were prohibited. Actually, Islam is unique in its concern for the peaceful elimination of this practice. Due to His perfect knowledge and wisdom, God did not order slavery abolished outright. Since the economy of every civilization on earth was based and dependent upon this system, not only would the Muslim community have been put at a great disadvantage by the immediate emancipation of all slaves, but the slaves themselves would have been unprepared for release into society without homes or means of support. Mercifully, God made the freeing of slaves within Islam a gradual transition. Manumission by the state and by individual Muslims was encouraged as a righteous deed, greatly rewarded in the hereafter. Manumission meaning freeing a slave. The Quran stated that obligatory zakah and charity funds could be used for the purpose of slaves to be freed, and freeing a slave is cited therein as expiation for breaking an oath and for the commission of particular kinds of sins and errors. Moreover, a slave could enter into a contract with his master to earn his freedom. Thousands of slaves requested and were granted contracts of emancipation by their Muslim owners. Prophet Muhammad repeatedly emphasized good treatment of the slaves who remained, severely rebuking those owners who transgressed. Under Islam, slaves were to be given the same quality of food and clothing as their master. They were not to be overworked. Their dignity was to be preserved, and they were to be treated with justice and kindness. Often, slaves became members of Muslim families and refused freedom. Only under Islam did the slave enjoy a unique position as a member of the household and community worthy of respect. In many cases, a slave would become a close friend and advisor of his master, or the master would even regard him as a son. It was not uncommon for slaves to be given precedence over free men regarding religious or worldly matters in which one of them excelled. For example, a slave well versed in the Quran could lead the prayer. The Muslims were ordered to obey if a slave should be appointed in charge of their affairs. Islam has always encouraged the emancipation of slaves with the objective of gradually diminishing their numbers and integrating them into society. As a result of Islamic teachings, slavery was almost completely eradicated from many areas of the Muslim world, peacefully and without bloodshed. Can any other religion or civilization make such a claim? Question 39. Is there any mention of human rights in Islam? Islam has laid down universal and fundamental rights for humanity as a whole, which are to be observed and respected under all circumstances. These basic rights are associated with Islamic faith and belief because they are divinely ordained. Thus, human rights in Islam are religious obligations, meaning that it is obligatory for every Muslim to protect them and restore them if they are violated. Islam declares all people equal in terms of human values, and all individuals are equal before the Islamic code of law. Its judgments and legal penalties are applicable to all races and classes of people without any distinction, and without any person, group, or nation acquiring immunity or privilege. Every human being is entitled to his integrity, honor, and reputation. Every human being is entitled to his integrity, honor, and reputation during his life and after his death. Islam condemns the abuse of power, position, and authority, and commands people to assist an oppressed person even with the use of force when necessary. Every individual in an Islamic society, regardless of his faith or religious affiliation, position, or social status, has certain immutable rights, which include the right to be consulted on issues that concern their economic and social affairs, the right to be consulted on issues that concern their economic and social affairs, the right to be considered innocent unless proven guilty, the right to seek judgment against oppressors, and to have an equal hearing before the judge. It is an unfortunate reality of our time, however, that the governments of many so-called Muslim countries do not apply these principles, but rather suppress public opinion and violate human rights. However, such tyranny is in no way representative of Islamic teachings. In fact, the Prophet of Islam warned the most ruthless in punishing people in this world will be the most ruthlessly punished of people by God on the day of resurrection. The most ruthless in punishing people in this world will be the most ruthlessly punished of people by God on the day of resurrection. And the Quran clearly commands, O you who have believed, stand up firmly for God and witness with justice, and do not let hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness. No one may be arrested, exiled, no one may be arrested, exiled, punished, or his freedom restricted without adequate legal action. No one may be subjected to physical or psychological torment, medical experimentation, or any other humiliating treatment. And it is not permitted to empower executive authority to issue exceptional laws. These human rights are comprehensive and applicable to every person under Islamic jurisdiction, regardless of his race, religion, nationality, or social status. They cannot be altered at any time or under any circumstances. Violation of these rights is a violation against the divine decree and necessitates punishment in the hereafter in addition to that of this world, unless the offender repents and reforms. If such human rights had never been enforced at some time in human history, they would have remained no more than theoretical ideals in people's minds. But Prophet Muhammad founded a civilization in which they were fully implemented, serving as an outstanding example for all future generations of mankind. A Muslim believer is obligated to oppose injustice and oppression, no matter who the victim happens to be. When seeing another human being in distress or critical need of assistance, it is his duty to help that person. Otherwise, he is accountable for whatever increase in suffering was caused by his neglect. Even during war, it is not permissible to harm women, children, the elderly, the sick, or the wounded. The hungry person must be fed, the naked clothed, and the wounded or deceased treated medically, irrespective of who they are. Under Islam, the lives and properties of all citizens are inviolable, whether they are Muslims or not. The right of security and protection to a person and his family is the most basic of all rights. It is unlawful in a Muslim society for any of its citizens to be harassed or threatened by words, acts, or weapons of any type. For the protection of a human life, in particular, Islam has required severe punishments for criminals who murder, injure, and harm others. One of the fundamental rights established by the sacred text is that no one can be compelled to accept Islam. It is the duty of Muslims to establish the proofs of Islam to people so that truth can be distinguished from falsehood. After that, whoever wishes to accept Islam may do so, and whoever wishes to continue in unbelief may do so. Question 40. Doesn't Islam oppress women? Many people think of Islam as a chauvinistic religion that demeans women, and the stereotypical image of the completely secluded and oppressed Muslim woman is all too common. They cite the condition of women in some Muslim countries to emphasize the point, but their error is that they fail to make a distinction between the practices of those people and the true teachings of the religion that they profess. Although women have been oppressed by Muslims in some cultures, this should not be understood as coming from the religion. Rather, it reflects customs that are inconsistent, if not completely contrary to Islamic teachings. And it is true that some Muslim men still oppress women, but then so do many non-Muslim men. When Muslims are at fault, it is either because of cultural habit or their ignorance about Islam. In actual fact, Islam expects its adherents to uphold the rights of women, protect their social status, and prevent their degradation in any way. The status of women in earlier civilization was so low that they were denied basic human dignity. Prostitution was a regular practice, and many considered women to be basically evil, subhuman, and inferior to men. Before Islam, the Arabs disdained women, and often when a female child was born, she was buried alive. Islam uplifted women and gave them honor and equal status, and it requires that this status be upheld and maintained. Islam secured for the woman her intellectual, religious, social, economic, and political rights, including the right to an education, the right to own property and to use it at her own discretion, and the right to work. A Muslim woman is a completely independent personality. In addition to her right to think and believe as she likes, Islam considers her to be an active member of society who can make a valuable contribution. From the dawn of Islam, women engaged in many occupations such as commerce, agriculture, and manufacturing. A Muslim woman can make any contract or bequest in her own name. She is entitled to inherit in her position as mother, a wife, a sister, and a daughter. It is not permissible for anyone to take a woman's wealth without her consent, and there is consensus among the scholars of Islam that all economic activities of a woman, like buying, selling, leasing, giving gifts, and giving collateral, are legally valid, and that she has a completely independent economic existence. Women have the right to a decent life without facing aggression or being wronged. Women have the right to be educated, to express themselves, to give sincere advice, to enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil, and to invite people to Islam. None of these basic principles have changed, but regarding their application, there can be no doubt that the weaker religious commitment has grown among Muslims. The more these rights, the weaker the religious commitment has grown among Muslims, the more these rights have been neglected. Modern Western societies claim to have improved the condition of women, but have actually demoted them to the level of slaves in the hands of pleasure seekers and sex marketers by convincing them that they should be freed from religious and social restrictions. The United States of America is one of the leading advocates of women's liberation, but it also has one of the highest rates of rape and sexual harassment in the world. A woman's proclaimed right to seek employment and climb the ladder of success is seldom without compromise, but much is overlooked in the quest to be equal with men. As a fundamental principle, Islam holds that women are indeed equal to men in their origin, their humanity, their honor, and their accountability before God. They are also equal in their need to fulfill their physical and material needs, to possess property and dispose of it as they wish. Both sexes are required to obtain knowledge. In fact, it is the religious duty of every Muslim man and woman. Women used to seek knowledge at the mosque and in the home of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. They even asked him to set aside a day for teaching them, and he did so. There were many excellent scholars, jurists, and writers among women during the era of the Prophet's companions and their students, as well as later periods of Islamic history. The notion that Islam makes women second-class citizens worth half a man is no more than a myth. Over 1,400 years ago, Islam elevated the status of women by declaring them sisters of men, giving them the right of education to the highest level, the right to choose a husband, the right to end an unhappy marriage, the right to inheritance, and in general the rights of a full citizen of the state. Under Islamic law, it is unlawful for a woman to be married off without her consent or forced into a marriage. She has the right to initiate a separation from marriage if her rights are not being granted or she cannot bear the husband. Prophet Muhammad is known to have annulled marriages of women who had been unwillingly coerced. Widows and divorcees have the right to remarry and are in fact encouraged to do so. When a Muslim woman marries, she does not give up her family name and keeps her distinct identity. In Muslim marriages, the husband is required to give a dowry to his wife, which becomes her private property and is not subject to the dictates of her male relatives. Similarly, any money she earns or receives, whether she is married or not, is her own to use in any way she sees fit. Islam places on men the obligation of protecting and maintaining all of their female relatives, and a man must provide for his wife even if she has money of her own. She is not obligated to spend anything in maintenance of her family and is thus relieved of the need to seek employment. However, she may work if she prefers to or if circumstances warrant it. The family, like any other organization, requires order and leadership. The Quran has given the husband a degree of authority over the wife, which means responsibility, guardianship, and accountability. It is in no way a license to practice tyranny within the household. Rather, it is the burden of responsibility to care completely and conscientiously for one's wife and children. In turn, obedience is due to him, but only pertaining to what is right and fair according to the Islamic Sharia. The Quran states, and due to women is what is similar to that expected from them. Not only are material and physical rights specified, but those of kindness and consideration are equally significant in Islamic law.